We have events multiple times a week from San Jose to San Francisco. We always have a busy calendar of events. I want to highlight a few events that are coming up. So in this room, Tuesday, January 28th, how to get your startup ready for venture capital funding, featuring Roger Royce of Royce Law Firm. Thursday, January 30th, at Wilmer Hale in Palo Alto, we have a venture capital panel, What's Hot in 2020. We are also collaborating with Startup Grind Global Conference 2020. It's their 10-year anniversary, and February 11th and 12th, our members get 15% off. So check out the details for those events and all of our events on our website, ideatoipo.com. We launched officially on February 1st, 2010. I have to ask, what day is it today and what year is it? Anyway, we're getting closer to our 10-year anniversary. So next week, by the way, we have like a 5-day 10-year anniversary celebration. So a lot of the celebrations will coincide with the events on our calendar. Some of them are off calendar. So talk to me if you want to come to some of the invite-only celebrations. So 10 years is a long time. So we launched on February 1st, 2010. At that time, we had no members and no events on our calendar. At this stage, we have over 70,000 members among all our meetup groups in the Bay Area. We've organized, promoted, and produced over 2,150 events. By any standard, by any measure, we're the most active, most prolific startup event organization in the history of Silicon Valley, bar none. I was expecting more than that, but that's okay. After 10 years, that's okay. I'll take it. Our mission is to promote entrepreneurship, support entrepreneurs, build community, and provide value in the Silicon Valley startup ecosystem. To that end, we provide content that's practical, actionable, and relevant, stuff you can actually use to succeed as entrepreneurs. We believe in building community because Silicon Valley is an aspirational ecosystem and it attracts people from all over the world who come here to do great things. And I would bet that no one here in this room was born and raised in Silicon Valley or the Bay Area. Is there anyone in this room who was born and raised? Oh, we got one person. Why are you here? In any case.
So I want to learn what others have to do.
Okay, sure, for sure. All right, so who here was not born and raised in Silicon Valley or the San Francisco Bay Area? Most of us, okay. So in addition to our content-oriented events throughout the week, we also have some fun events, social events, and one of them is the TGIF Mixer, and the next one is January 31st, and that's hosted by Joe, one of our team members. So if you want to see him again, he'll be hosting the TGIF Mixer on January 31st at the Hyatt Regency Santa Clara. So hope to see you there. You're all invited. We have many partners to help us do what we do. Law firms, venture capital firms, angel investor groups, incubators, accelerators, colleges, universities, lots of players in Silicon Valley. Tonight, we're grateful to TechCode for hosting us at this beautiful venue. And if you have any questions about TechCode, come talk to me. I can connect you with Sean, who's the general manager here. He can tell you what goes on here and how you can become a member. One of our other partners is here today, and I would like to have him come up and say a few words. So let's hear it for Pramal and City National Bank. Applause.
Hi, good evening. My name is Pramal Sagani. I work at City National Bank in Palo Alto. My job is I work with a lot of VCs and startups and entrepreneurs and try to connect them. So if you're looking for any connection or networking, I can help you with that. And I do is manage your accounts at the bank. So if you ever want to build an account or lending, I can take care of that too. At City National, we have our own portfolio, so it's not like a retail bank where you can just walk in and meet anybody. We manage it personally, so manage your accounts and help you with that. And we do a lot of events just like this one, and if you want to join us on that one, we can help you with that too. Okay, and I have some flyers and my business card over there. If you need, you can take it. We can connect later too. Thank you.
Thank you.
So though our local mission is to support entrepreneurs here in Silicon Valley, our global mission is to democratize entrepreneurship and innovation all around the world. To that end, we have a robust video initiative, and our partner in that regard is Tim Jeggers of Jeggers Films, one of the top professional videographers in Silicon Valley. So let's hear it for Tim.
Rob. Thank you, everybody. So I do a lot of events like this. I do branding content, promotional stuff, storytelling, videos, just in general. So if you have any questions about where to find this content or about anything else that I'm doing, feel free to ask. When you do get to the Q&A session at 8 o'clock, we're going to hold the questions until then. I'm going to have a mic over there. It's not to amplify, but it's just to give me nice, clean audio to my camera. So I would greatly appreciate it if you would hold your questions until the mic's been given to you, and then we can maintain peace and order, and the sound on the video will be awesome, and then you can show the video to all your friends and how great you sounded tonight. So thanks for having us. I'm going to plug some juice into this laptop and pass it back to Rob.
So let me expand on that. So we are videotaping the event, mainly the content. During the Q&A session, no one's going to be videotaping any of the questioners. It's to provide context for the answers. So if you have a very sensitive or personal question, you might want to save that and do that offline. If not, we'll stick around. She'll be happy to answer all your questions on the case-by-case basis. But maybe you have a general question that someone else in the room might want to be illuminated on. That might be a good time to ask. Again, general questions during the Q&A session. So here's the schedule for the rest of the evening. Our presenter will present. She's got an awesome slide deck. Audience members, hold your questions until 8 p.m. At that point, we'll open it up to the audience. We'll go around with the microphone. If you want a copy of the slide deck, we'll make that available to everyone who registered. And if you didn't register in advance, give me your email address, and we'll have these slides emailed to you. At 8:30 p.m., we're going to end the formal program. We're going to have a raffle. We have a great prize that was contributed by City National Bank, and I have a few other items that are pretty helpful for entrepreneurs. If you need to get up at any time to use the restrooms or grab more food, it's okay. It's a very informal environment. So at this point, I want to introduce our featured speaker tonight. She is one of the top immigration attorneys in Silicon Valley and the Bay Area. She's the founder of her own immigration law firm, and she's been speaking on our platform for many, many years, and she's helped out many, many of our meetup members. Most importantly, though, she's passionate about helping entrepreneurs, tech professionals, and international investors succeed here in Silicon Valley. So let's hear it for Nadia Yakub.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, it's been, I think, 5 years.
It's been a long
yeah,
time.
I've been doing this for 5 years. So, Tim, do you want me to use any mic or just? This is yeah, and it's you guys can hear me, okay, right? So just a quick overview. I'd love to know what status you guys are in. If you don't mind sharing, I'll just ask, like, how many of you are here as visitors on a B1 or visa waiver? Okay. And how many of you are students on an F1 OPT? Okay. Are you on OPT or still studying? CPT? OPT or STEM OPT? Are any of you H1Bs? Yeah. Okay. Anybody a green card holder? Okay. All right. Any U.S. citizens? Oh, okay. All right. So we have a nice mix tonight. So as Rob was saying, I've been presenting here with Idea to IPO for the last 5 years. I actually returned to private practice after being in the government for 5 years, where I actually was working at a court reviewing deportation orders. So definitely spent 5 years looking at things, from a different perspective than tech entrepreneurs. But before that, I worked for 8 years with Fragman, which is the world's largest immigration law firm. And I actually started in their New York office, and then I actually managed their first international office in Belgium, and then came to San Francisco. So I was there 8 years, then the government for 5, and then I decided to start my own practice 5 years ago. So I've been doing this for 20 years, but I also went into immigration. I went to law school to be an immigrant rights advocate, and I went into immigration because it's a story very personal to me. My dad and his brothers were international students. My dad's brother got a job with McDonnell Douglas, got sponsored for his green card, naturalized, sponsored my dad. And then that's how we eventually came over. So really, I understand how the process works. I know it's long. It can be frustrating and stressful. And especially in today's climate, I'd have to say I have been doing immigration work for during 4 presidencies, and I'd say this one is by far the most stressful. But that's why we're here, and that's why Rob has me come and speak, so there's the right information gets out there, and we also allow you guys to ask your questions or share your concerns. So I'll give you an overview of our presentation tonight. So first I'll talk about working as an international student. Believe it or not, a lot of my clients have been students, and they've just met great classmates with whom they've started companies or come up with an idea. And so working as a student is often a question, as in, well, can I start my own company when I'm on a student visa? So we'll talk a little bit about what options there are for you to start a company. And also for those of you who, right now I know there's one visitor, but oftentimes people come here saying, well, I want to start a company. What about if I study here? Because it's a great way to set up a network to then launch from there. So we'll talk about studying in the US and working as a student. And then we'll jump into the most common employment-based visas, right? Like the H-1B, the L, the O, the TN, the E-3. We'll just run through those. We'll have one very short slide on the paths for permanent residence. This is not really about how to get a green card. It's more about how can you work in the US and start your own company. And then I'll have one slide on just what I have seen in the last 20 years being the most common obstacles to getting a visa. And then that's when we'll open it up for questions. And again, because we're videotaping, we're going to hold questions till the end. Okay, so studying in the US. Generally, that's the F1 visa. There's also the possibility to study in the US on the J1, which is for scholars and academics. But also there's another category of J1s, which I'll cover at the end. However, most people who want to start a company here often have been inspired during their studies here. So the question is, well, can I start my own company while I'm studying? So this is a little bit of, you're technically not supposed to do anything related to a business when you are studying. However, if you have OPT, then you can start your own business, right? So if you've graduated and are now doing optional practical training, OPT, that's 1 year of work authorization that follows your studies. During that time, you can certainly start your own company. Okay, so that's the OPT. Now the interesting thing is, if you are a STEM graduate, which is science, technology, engineering, or mathematics, if you are a graduate in one of these types of fields, then you can get an extra 2 years of work authorization. But the interesting thing about the STEM OPT is that you cannot work for your own company. It is truly for a traineeship experience, so then you have to get an employer to sponsor you for the STEM OPT extension. So it's unfortunate, a lot of my clients who have started a company on their OPT cannot take advantage of their STEM OPT, but there are some other visa categories that I'll talk about later in the presentation that have been available to them, okay? So that's studying in the US. So if you are, let's say during your academic year, if you're on the F1, you're studying, you really shouldn't be starting your own business when you're supposed to be studying. But again, once you're done studying and you're on OPT, you absolutely can start your own business, okay? So that's studying in the US and using that as a vehicle for starting your own business or thinking about starting your business. The next we're going to talk about are the temporary employment-based visas, and I'm going to start with the most common one, which is the H-1B. The H-1B is for high-skilled workers. Now, a high-skilled worker visa is defined as a position that requires a specialty occupation. Well, sorry, let me say that again. It's for a specialty occupation, and a specialty occupation is defined as a position that requires at least a bachelor's degree. This is the real issue today with H-1B visas, where the government's pushing back really hard on positions that they believe do not require a bachelor's degree, right? So they're pushing back and saying things like, oh, a computer systems analyst, that doesn't require a bachelor's degree. I have data scientists who have masters in mathematics from Stanford, and the government's pushing back and saying, show us that a data scientist position requires a bachelor's degree. So they're really pushing back on this, and so it is getting harder to get an H-1B in today's climate. And I'm going to go through the requirements step by step with you in each of the following slides. But again, the big requirement is that the position must require a bachelor's degree, right? The typical H-1B job is software developer. I mean, that's like the most common. It's a software developer, then there's financial analysts. That's a second most common one. So that's what the H-1B is for, is these types of highly skilled occupations. These requirements, the remaining requirements, you need to show an employer-employee relationship. So for someone who's an entrepreneur or an investor, you can't set up your own company and sponsor yourself for an H-1B. There's like one workaround is that if you have a very clear board of directors and you can show that you are responsible to them, but that's not working so well anymore because there's a question on the forms. Does the H-1B beneficiary have an ownership interest in the firm? If you answer yes, they're going to ask, well, what's the ownership interest? How much? So if you're saying that, you're 30% owner or 40% owner or more than 50% owner, they're going to say he's not really or she's not really an employee of the company, right? So the H-1B is not the right visa for those of you who are interested in starting your own company and working for that company, right? So employer-employee relationship, and I'll drill down a little bit more in that in a later slide. The third element is that you have to be paid the prevailing wage for the position. And then the fourth and final element is that there are significant government filing fees which need to be paid by the employer. Okay, so I'll go over those in just a moment. So what are the big issues for a lot of startups? So you may not be thinking of starting a company right now, but you may be wanting to work for a startup on the H-1B, the high skilled worker visa. If that's the case, you need to be aware that that startup needs to pay you the prevailing wage for your job in that geographic area, right? And there's a Department of Labor library that you can look up, and I can send it to you. It clicks here. I don't know if it'll work. I can try it. Let's see. I'm trying to click on there. Oh yeah, see it. Can you guys see it though? I don't think. Okay, so that's okay. What we'll do is you can click on it in the slides. So after the presentation, I email my slides to all of you, and you can click on it, and you will see it's called flcdatacenter.com, Foreign Labor Certification Data Center. You can pick your state, the county, and then there's a whole drop-down menu of occupations. You can look okay, well, what's the salaries for a data scientist in Santa Clara? You can look it up, okay? So that's the prevailing wage requirement. Now, of course, if you're going to go work at Google or Facebook, they pay well above market. So they need to pay you, the foreign national, the same they're paying their U.S. worker, right? So let's say the prevailing wage for a software developer in Menlo Park or Mountain View, let's just say, is $110,000, but Google pays $145,000. They need to pay you $145,000, not $110,000, right? So that's the prevailing wage requirement. You either need to be paid the higher of the actual or prevailing wage. Okay, so that's really important. So what that also presupposes is that you are an employee of the company. You can't be an independent contractor. You can't be getting a 1099. It's not bonuses. It's not stock options. It's salary, base salary. Okay? The next element that I was talking about is the need for an employer-employee relationship, right? This builds on what I was just saying. You can't be a 1099er. You have to be a W-2. You can't be a volunteer because there's a prevailing wage requirement. You can be part-time, but what they really want to see is that there's an employer-employee relationship. They want to see things like an offer letter. They want to see that there's a workspace for you. They want to see that there's a performance review. They want to see pay stubs with like maybe your benefits. So they really want to see these types of documents to support the claim that you're an employee. So what does that mean? You can't be self-employed, like I was saying, can't be an independent contractor, but you also cannot work for what is very common, and they used to get approved a little more easily, but now they're really getting denied, is if you're working for like a temp placement agency, like a job shop they're called. And that is basically you're working for a company that just contracts with clients. And then there's layer and layer of subcontractor. So it's a third-party work site. They don't know who is the actual employer. And that's what the government's pushing back on a lot. They're saying, who is the employer here? Is it contracting company A, B, C, D? Is it the end client? What's going on? And so they don't like those. However, if you're working for McKinsey and you're off-site, or if you're working for Deloitte and you're going to visit client sites, that's okay to be working off-site. That's okay that you're not physically working for Deloitte. You're, at ExxonMobil, maybe doing an audit. That's all okay. But they do not like where, let's be very honest, they don't like the IT consulting services firms that are just putting people on client sites. Okay? I'm sure you're hearing more about H-1B denials. You may be hearing more about government pushback. The real pushback, the real denials are coming in that industry, the IT services industry. Okay, so I was talking about the H-1B filing fees. Now, the law is very clear. The employer must pay. Do employers violate this requirement? All the time. But they shouldn't. They should be paying for the government filing fees, and they should also pay the legal fees. It's on the forms they sign that they have not required you to pay. What are those fees? So the first fee is there's a base of $460, and then there's a $500 fee, and then there's either a $750 or $1,500, depending if the employer has 26 or more employees. And then if you want a decision in 15 calendar days as opposed to several months, it's an extra $1,440. This is optional. The foreign national could pay for this, but these fees, which you're looking at $1,710 to $2,460, these need to be covered by the employer. And the employer should also cover any attorney filing fees. I just want to let you know the government is planning on increasing the filing fees. They've proposed to increase it by several hundred more. And we're just waiting for those proposed fees to be finalized. Okay, so now the big issue with the H-1B is that there's an annual limit. Now, when I first started practicing 19 years ago, we didn't have this problem. And that's because there were 195,000 H-1Bs available, and they never were used up. So there was never an issue. There was never a lottery, which I'm going to talk about in just a moment. But what has happened since then is, 9/11 happened, the terrorist attacks, and after that they reduced the number of H's available from 195 to 65. And then in the ensuing 18 years, they just are not increasing them. They're just not. And of course, we had the crash in 2008. And then since then, we've been growing and growing and growing. And Bill Gates and founders of Google and Mark Zuckerberg, they all go out to Congress and they beg Congress, could you please increase this number? And it's just not happening. What has happened is they've added 20,000 extra for U.S. master's degree holders. So if you've graduated from a U.S. master's program, then there's an extra 20,000 H-1B visas available for you, okay? So that's unfortunately, the number is quite low of visas available. So what that means is every year there's a lottery. And the lottery used to be run the first week of April, and it used to require employers to prepare complete petitions, file it, and it's kind of a gamble, right? You're spending all this money for legal fees to prepare a petition, file on April 1 for an H-1B that if it's selected, the earliest it takes effect is October 1. So if you're a startup, I mean, you're not going to necessarily be able to plan that far ahead. You don't know what your hiring needs are going to be in October. If you're a small company, a medium company, a lot of my clients are like, I have no idea if I'm going to need this person in 6 months. And so it really benefited the larger companies that could just kind of spend the money. The government filing fees were returned if the petition wasn't selected, but the legal fees, that was a sunk cost. So they have changed it. It's going to be different. But before I jump into all that, I do want to say that some H-1B petitions are not subject to the annual limit. Okay? If you are working for a university as a researcher, let's say a university-based hospital, these are not subject to the limit. So some research organizations are CAP exempt, universities are CAP exempt, and of course once you're in the United States, if you're switching jobs, you're extending, that's not subject to the annual limit, okay? So there's been some changes to the lottery, as I mentioned. The first change, and they implemented last year, was to benefit all U.S. master's degree holders. They really want as many U.S. master's degree holders to get an H-1B. So the way they run the lottery is such that it will benefit them. So that was the first change they proposed last year, and they implemented it last year. And I actually saw it in my own small practice. I saw nearly, I would say, 80% of my petitions that were selected went to people with U.S. master's degrees, okay? And then the next change, and it's actually going to take effect this year, is that they're no longer going to ask employers to file a complete petition. There's just actually an electronic registration form that employers will complete for each person they want to sponsor, okay? It's a $10 fee. It's a short form. They've released a couple of slides, screenshots of what this portal is going to look like. If you can believe, they haven't really publicly announced what it's going to look like. I mean, that's just how it's been with this administration. So we haven't even, as lawyers, been able to register or anything. They say they're going to release it. But from the screenshots of the forms, the pages they've shown, it seems pretty straightforward. You fill it out. You're going to be filling out these forms between March 1 and March 20. You never want to wait too late of any registration period because these are government websites. They crash. I can tell you that I go through this on a regular basis in my job. The websites are crashing. Okay, and I don't know if any of you have ever registered for the green card lottery. Okay, there's a window too with the green card lottery, and by the end of the window, forget it, right? Was that your experience? Yeah, because it's just crashing. So it's really important to register early, and then if you are selected, then you'll get a notification, and at that point, you have 90 days, okay, where the employer needs to file the petition, all right? So March 1, you can start registering. You probably want, though, before doing that, is to have a lawyer make sure that you qualify, right? That the position requires a degree, that you have the right degree, that the job, that the prevailing wage, the salary is right, the employer is viable, there's the right relationship. I mean, there needs to be a review of the case because the government has been very clear that they're going to be keeping track of employers who are submitting registrations and not following through if they've been selected. They're going to be, because what they don't want is that everyone just goes, because now the system's so easy, right? Now the registration, it's not going to require as much of employers. So what they're worried is that it's just going to mean thousands and thousands of employers are going to file petitions, and that they want to make sure that if you're filing, you're going to follow through if you're selected. Okay? So you do want an attorney to check for you to make sure that the petition qualifies, and the attorney can sign up. Okay? So it's March 1 through March 20th. By March 31st, all the they will select the registrations that make the lottery, and then you have to file in 90 days. So in terms of hard numbers, historically, there would be around 200 to 220,000 petition filed for around, let's just say 80,000. There's 65,000, subtracting about 6,000 for certain visas for Chileans and Singaporeans, and then the 20,000 for the U.S. Masters. So you're looking at about, there were really 80,000 visas available. There would be somewhere between 200 to 225,000 petitions filed. So we're looking at what, like a 30% chance of being selected. So it'll be interesting to see with the new system what those stats will look like. Okay, so that's the lottery. I think it'll be easier to file, but I think the likelihood of being selected is going to be lower, given how easy the registration process has become. Okay, so that's the lottery. These are just some nuts and bolts. How much can you work? As I was mentioning, you can work part-time. You don't have to work full-time. This is often the workaround for my smaller clients who can't meet the prevailing wage, right? Let's say the salary is too high. So then we look at what's the hourly rate, and then we say, okay, well, let's just have the person work 25 hours or 30 hours, and that way you can satisfy the prevailing wage requirement. You also can work for two employers. You can work for one part-time and one full-time, okay? But your work is tied to your sponsoring employer. So some people think, okay, I have an H, I'm in, can I go work somewhere else? You're really tied to your employer. And if you want to work for someone else, you have to be sponsored by them. Now, a very common question I get is, well, what if I want to do Uber, or what if I want to do Lyft? You know, so this is a gray zone. You're supposed to be complying with your terms of your visa. So if you are working on your visa full time, you're earning, you're paying taxes, could you do a little Uber? Could you do a little Lyft? You know, it's not employment. It's being an independent contractor. So it is a gray zone. I think the key is if you can say to an officer, the key is if you plan on applying for permanent residence at some point, is how to explain to an officer that this was maybe just a side gig, maybe wasn't for a whole bunch of time. I mean, the key was, were you maintaining the primary purpose of your visa? Does that make sense? So if you have an H-1B to be a software engineer, you're working there 40 hours a week, you're doing what you're supposed to, and then you're working 10 hours as an Uber driver, it's potentially defensible. Is it clear-cut? No. We haven't seen this really coming up yet in adjudications, okay? So duration and dependence, just to let you know, for the H-1B, the maximum is 6 years, unless you've been sponsored for permanent residence by your employer, in which case you can extend indefinitely till you get your green card, okay? And dependents, you can bring your spouse and your children, but your spouse and your children cannot work, which is a bummer. There is a EAD for spouses of H-1B workers. It's called the H-4 EAD. It's also only available if the H-1B worker has been sponsored for permanent residence, and it also is on shaky ground. This administration has been threatening to eliminate the H-4 EAD since we've had the new president. It's already been 3 years, but they haven't yet. They haven't eliminated it yet. Okay, so that covers the H. I'm going to move on to the other most common visa, which is the L1 for intra-company transferees. Okay, so essentially an international company is defined as a company under U.S. immigration law that operates in 2 or more countries. So it could be the U.S. and England, or U.S. and India, and that makes it an international company. If they are legally related, then you can transfer personnel between the 2 companies. And if you transfer them to the U.S., there is a visa available called the L1. Okay? So how does it work? There are several scenarios in which the L could be appropriate. When I was at Fragment, of course, there's McDonnell Douglas, there's IBM, there's General Electric. I mean, General Electric's lists of companies is like this thick, right? But those are like the most common L1 visas. I mean, to move people that work for GE or these large international companies. But I also have clients where it's a small company in, let's say, Japan, and then they want to set up a new office in the US. And if that's what they're doing, if they're coming to open a legally related entity in the US, you could get an L1 visa to open a new office. Okay, now you are eligible to transfer to a legally related entity if you have been working abroad for at least 1 year. Okay, and when I say you've been working abroad, it means physically there, because a lot of people are like, well, they're coming over here and spending time here as on a B1 visitor visa, or they've been studying here. That time doesn't count. You've got to physically spend 365 days in the overseas country in order to qualify for the transfer. Okay, and then you can come into work if you are coming to work as a manager, executive, or specialized knowledge worker. And specialized knowledge, we get a lot of pushback from the government. The most common specialized knowledge requirement is satisfied by language. A Japanese client, they're coming over, they speak Japanese, they know how to communicate with the parent office in Japan. Same with Germans. So it's usually something around language, or they have specialized knowledge of the company's product, operations, protocols. That's specialized knowledge. Okay? So just a few nuts and bolts on the L. It's definitely less expensive than the H. It's $960. That should be, the premium processing should be updated to $1,440. They just increased that. And in terms of duration, if you come in as a specialized knowledge worker, it's L1B, and that's 5 years. And if you come in as an executive or manager, you have a 7-year max. The great thing about executive or managers is that actually there's a green card. So if you come in and you're on an L1A, you can also then apply for a green card as an international manager or executive. Okay? And the great news about the Ls is that your spouses can work. They get an L2 EAD, Employment Authorization Document. Okay? And that is a really good visa for any of you who are investors or tech entrepreneurs and you have a company back at home and you want to grow the operations in the US. It's a great visa. Okay, this is my favorite visa. It's the O1 visa for individuals of extraordinary ability. Now, I do want to say that oftentimes people are not eligible, let's say now, and we're going to talk about the criteria. But what I encourage all my clients to do is really to start thinking with the criteria in mind as you plan for your future. And what I find is, especially now, with, having done this for 20 years, I have clients who literally I've talked to while they were at Stanford as international students, and 4 or 5 years later, I'm doing their O1. So they weren't ready 4 or 5 years ago, but in those intervening 4 or 5 years, they've done what needs to be done. So what is it that needs to be done? So let me tell you. First of all, the O1 is for individuals who have sustained national or international acclaim in the sciences, arts, education, business, or athletics. Just want to make a small caveat. I don't know if any of you are artists or performers, but definitely they have a different set of criteria. It's a little bit looser, and you just can email me if you want the criteria for that. But given the audience, which here, I figure we'll talk about the more general ones, okay? And you have to be coming to the U.S. to work in your area of extraordinary ability. So there's an element of the position has to require someone with extraordinary ability. It is tied to a sponsoring employer. But as I was mentioning about for my F1 students who want to start their own company, or anyone who wants to start their own company, the O1 is a fantastic visa. And I've done that for my clients, right? If they've been going to school, they've developed a product, they've gotten the funding, they've gotten a little patent, they've published some articles, we get them an O1 so that they can work for their own company. Okay, it's good for 3 years. You can renew it indefinitely. If you're really high net worth, some people do not want a green card, so they prefer to stay on the O. But most people actually eventually jump onto the green card based on extraordinary ability. Just a little note on this, your spouses, unfortunately, cannot work. So what's the criteria? Now, I do want to say, I always get a kick out of this. When you read the regulations, this is straight from the regulations. The regulations say evidence that the beneficiary has received a major internationally recognized award, such as a Nobel Prize. Right. So then people are like, Nadia, why are we discussing this? Because if you keep reading, or evidence of at least 3 of the following. Again, you have to show 3. Now, of course, if you can show more, we always try to show more. And even if it's just like one association. So we'll go through these criteria, all right? So the first is national or international awards in your field. Now, they have to go to you. This is something that I've seen developing in how the cases are being adjudicated. It used to be you could say, okay, my company won this award and I was the genius behind the scenes, right? Or my school won this award and I was the genius behind the scenes. Well, they're not buying that anymore. And part of the reason why the government, there used to be, honestly, with O's, there was a 90% approval rate. Okay, and the reason, this was back in the day, but what has happened is because of the H-1B lottery, because of the fact that a person who wants to work for his or her own company cannot do that on the H, there's just been a real movement towards getting the O, and there are literally little firms and boutiques that if you pay them $5,000, they'll get you into Forbes, they'll get you into TechCrunch, they'll help you get articles published, press coverage about you. So the government's caught on to that, and so now they're pushing back pretty hard, right? And so one of the things about national awards is it's got to be you, and then we have to explain, like, here's this really prestigious award, here's why it's prestigious, we explain. Published material about you or your work. Again, they're really pushing back because it's getting easy to pay for articles about you, right? You can pay Forbes and pay $3,000 and be like, hey, feature this article. And so they really push, like, show us how many views it got. Show us, they just want to know about circulation, about where the publication was. Because there was a time, literally, I'd say even 5 years ago, I met someone from here. She retained me. I got her an O1. And one of the ways we satisfied published material about you or your work was articles on LinkedIn, right? Now the government's like, LinkedIn, forget it. We're not, but 5 years ago, it was working. Scholarly articles. This is another one where they're really pushing back. First thing they do, they check Google Scholar. They check for you. If you're saying that you have scholarly publications, they check on Google Scholar. They see how many publications you have. I mean, these officers aren't stupid. They're on Google too, right? So they're checking everything. But scholarly articles, they like to see that you've got lots of citations. And if you don't have a lot of citations quantitatively, we show that qualitatively, to be cited in a subsequent article in like the preeminent journal is very valuable. Being asked to judge the work of others in your field. This is another one where I get a lot of pushback now because everybody that's a superstar offers to be a judge at a panel or offers to, all these all these hackathons and startup competitions. A lot of my clients volunteer to speak at those or to participate. So the government's pushing back and saying, show us that you were invited. And so the response to that is, well, we offered, but we wouldn't have been accepted if we weren't experts in our field, right? But so another one is membership in associations that require outstanding achievements. That, I don't use as much. There's important and original contributions. That's patents. That's maybe a coding language. That could be something you've come up with. Maybe how you're invited to speak at conferences. Maybe you've applied for a trademark. A high salary in your field. And then employment in a critical role for established organizations. And they're really focusing now on established. I'm going to have to zip. I have 10 minutes. But I do want to tell you, I've created a podcast series where I have literally a podcast episode on each of these visa categories. So they're really like digestible. They're 10, 15 minutes. So if there's a visa category that you felt, you would like to know more about, you can listen to those. And they are oriented very much towards like someone who wants to start their own company. Okay. This is the J1 visa. This is for trainees or interns. So you're abroad, you want to come, you want a taste of the, the Silicon Valley ecosystem, you want to work here. You could apply for a J1 visa that allows you to work here between 12 to 18 months. So not longer than that. But it's a nice way to get a taste. You can't use it to start your own company, but you could certainly use it to get a taste of what it's like to be in a startup. Okay? Just a few more details. You can't intern. You do have to get paid as a trainee or intern on the J1. So interning has to be paid. As I explained, it's good for an intern, it's 12 months. For a trainee, that is someone who's graduated from a foreign university, it's up to 18 months. And they do want to make sure that you're coming back to your home country, okay? So they don't want to hear that this is a visa you're planning to use to get an H-1B. Does that happen? Yes, but you shouldn't be, that shouldn't be your primary goal. Okay, this is the E-visa. This is for treaty traders and investors. Here's the biggest thing about the E-visa. You need to be a national of a country with which the United States has a treaty. Okay, so India and China do not have treaties with the U.S. Russia doesn't, Brazil doesn't, but Iran does, and Pakistan does. So it's not intuitive. And there is a list of E-countries. When you get the slides, you can just click on it. It takes you to the State Department, and you can see all the countries that have a treaty with the U.S. So there's two subcategories. There's for trade, that is like the product. You maybe it's sheets or towels or certain furniture items that you are trading primarily with the United States, or it's just an investment. Okay? And the investment must be substantial, and it has to be for a real business. So it can't be for property. You can't invest in an apartment building. Okay, and the question I always get with the E is, well, what's the amount? What's the bare minimum that I need to invest? And the government, they don't have anything defined in statute, but it has to make sense for the business. Okay, so I have clients in Italy who will buy a gelato shop in San Diego. maybe it costs them $60,000, okay? And then I have clients in Japan who buy a sake, a sushi bar, and that costs them a couple $100,000, right? So it has to make sense with the business. When it was easier, I had a woman who started her own personal coaching. She was a fitness person from Switzerland, and she started her own coaching business. I don't know if that would fly today because it has to be a business that's going to grow. It's going to be where you're employing people. So you definitely want a business plan. You want an office space. You want to transfer money into a U.S. bank account. You know, usually a safe amount is 100,000 and above. Okay, that's a safe amount. Do you have to spend it all? No, but you definitely want that kind of money transferred over here with a business plan. And then, of course, at renewal stages, they're looking at how you're spending. Okay, I have 5 minutes. I'm going to race. So these are usually done at the consulate. You register your company, your U.S. company, at the consulate, and it's $270. It's actually valid indefinitely in 2-year increments. It's a 5-year visa, but each time you come in, you're given 2 years. And your spouse can work. So oftentimes what I have is the E with the spouse will work for the company, right? So it's like usually 2 spouses will be setting up a business here. I'm going to race through these because I'm not sure if these really will apply to any of you. There are visas for specific nationals. Are there any Australians in the room? Okay, because there's an E3 visa for Australian nationals. It's essentially like the H-1B, but just for Australians. Okay, so it has to be a specialty occupation. You have to meet the prevailing wage. There has to be an employer. Okay, they don't have the 6-year limit. It's 2-year validity, renewable indefinitely, and the spouses can apply for work authorization. Do we have any TN, Mexicans or Canadians? No? Okay, that's a TN visa. This is for Mexicans or Canadians. It is for certain occupations. There's a schedule of occupations under NAFTA, which was the North American Free Trade Agreement, which has been renamed and is on the chopping board. But essentially, there's a schedule of occupations. So it's not like the H-1B where it's a specialty occupation. In fact, a lot of positions you would think would qualify don't make it. They're not on the schedule. But the ones that are most commonly used are engineer, computer systems analyst. There's actually nothing for a financial analyst, which is a real problem. There's no prevailing wage requirement. You cannot start your own company on the TN. It's valid indefinitely. A lot of my clients, actually, they're quite miserable here, so they're now applying for permanent residence in Canada. I have some clients who are getting it in like 6 months, and they're actually aiming to become Canadians, and then they're looking at the TN as a way to come back here. So that's the TN. Really quickly, the avenues for permanent residence. As I said, this would be a quick slide. So there are 5 primary ways to get permanent residence in the United States, and that's when you have a green card. The first, of course, is employment. There's several subcategories under employment, but you could be someone of extraordinary ability. You could be an outstanding researcher or scientist. You could be an international manager. You could be in the national interest. You could be a professional. So that's the employment-based. The next is family-based. So I hear that there's lots of great dating apps. Find yourself a U.S. citizen, because that is the fastest way to get a green card. And there's a lot of marriage fraud, and they're definitely, I had a client, she was separated. She and her husband were separated, and they were asked, people think that the questions are really crazy, and I think that's coming from movies. But they do ask things like, what'd you guys eat for dinner last night, separately? Or I think the most invasive question I've heard in my 20 years is, what form of contraception do you use? And that's by keeping them separated, right? But marriage is your goal. That is like, unless you entered illegally, meaning you entered without inspection, like as in you crossed the border, the marriage to a U.S. citizen forgives a lot of things and is the best way to have a green card, in my opinion. It's also my favorite. Those are one of my favorite cases. Then there's the annual green card lottery. Now, not all nationals can apply, but there's the green card lottery. Last year, the State Department said 15 million people applied. So the chances are small. It's 50,000 green cards. But I have clients who've gotten it, and I actually am going to be doing a podcast because I have an interview with someone who did it. Okay, and then the fourth way is asylum, and that's if you're afraid to return to your home country. The nationalities that are the most common or the highest grant levels are to Chinese because of the forced sterilization or religious persecution, and then the Indians. And that's also because of there's a lot from Sikh minorities or other minorities. But asylum is if you're afraid to go home. And then the last is, it used to be called the $1 million green card, but in November the amount increased to 1.8 million. But also interestingly enough, the biggest users of this green card are the Chinese and Indians. So those are your ways of getting a green card, and you can get citizenship 5 years later. Okay? And then just some common obstacles. I know I have a few minutes, but just some common obstacles to keep in mind because the system is getting so tight in the U.S. and the data that they have is just, the data is getting deeper and deeper. I don't know what is a better way to describe it, but between the biometrics, they're having you do fingerprinting, the swiping of the passports. I mean, they are tracking things. 20 years ago, it just was so loose compared to what it is today. And so the most common obstacles I see in causing delays getting a visa or just delays in processing, number one is if you've had a J1 visa and you have what is called, you have a 2-year home residency requirement. So the J1 visa, as a reminder, it's for interns, trainees, scholars, professors. They come and they have to go home and spend 2 years before getting another visa. Another issue that is of real interest to the U.S. is if you have been traveling to countries of interest, like Iran, Sudan. If you're traveling to countries of interest, they're going to be looking at your passport and they're going to be paying attention. If you have previously overstayed, so if you've been here unlawfully, that's going to be a real problem. And if you've committed an offense in any country in the world, like I said, the database sharing, the cooperation among the different security organizations in different countries, it's getting deeper and deeper, and so they're able to track more. And if you've ever been arrested or convicted in the U.S. for anything, that's going to delay your visa process. It's not going to prevent you from getting approved. It could delay. And then, of course, there are certain offenses that will prevent you from getting a visa. And one of the ones that are most surprising to people is any drug-related offense. Marijuana is different now. But, possession of cocaine, you're never going to be allowed back in the U.S. So that's, criminal record can be a real issue. So if you do get arrested, even for a DUI, you want to talk to an immigration lawyer before you plead guilty to anything so you understand what the consequences will be, okay? So as I was mentioning, I started a podcast series just because I saw that a lot of my clients, we would do consults or they would have a quick call or these presentations, and then they would just want a little more. And so, they say the best way to learn is reading, writing, and talking about something. So you've heard me speak. Maybe the podcast will just help. And I also have interviews with a former asylum officer. I have interviewed with a former immigration judge on what happens during a removal proceeding. I have an interview with a criminal defense attorney in case you're ever arrested or convicted of an offense, what to do. And then I have an interview with a married couple, about their journey. So that could be something you could look at, and connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll get your slides for your email address from Rob, and I'll send the slides, and I think we can open it up.
Let's hear it for an audience.
Okay.
So we have about 30 minutes to take questions.
Thanks, Natalie, for a great talk. It was very informative. But I wasn't sure if I heard, for an entrepreneur who's doing a tech startup here in the Valley, what is the visa that you recommend?
The O.
The L.
Yeah.
So,
Unless you are of a, I mean, are you talking about yourself? Yeah, because, and you're a national of, yeah. So then, because there's no treaty with India. If you are a national of a treaty country, then the E, but usually they're looking for funding here. So, if you
If you can secure funding, is that a check mark on the O?
yes, absolutely. It's like you're getting an award, in effect. Yeah.
yeah, just two quick.
Sorry, there's a question.
Oh yeah, just two quick questions. Thank you for the presentation. So the first question is like, you talk about the H-1B like screenshots. So do you know like what information are needed from the employer on a form, like yen or any specific information?
Yeah, just name, when they were established, FEIN number, which is their employer identification number, and then your name, what the job title will be, location, these basics.
Okay, got it. Thank you. And for the O1, say when you're founding your own company and you want to apply for yourself, do you need a co-founder that like actually signs all the letters for you?
You could, you don't need a co-founder. You could have like maybe a business lawyer. You could have someone who's a designated representative. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. Oh, actually, just one last question
Yeah.
about L1. Like you mentioned three requirements. So, does someone have to apply for all the three requirements, or one of them is fine?
Requirements?
Requirements saying like being manager or executives, being outside of the country for more than a year, and there's another requirement. So, do we have to qualify for all of them to?
Yeah, so you need to have worked for the company abroad for a year. You need to be coming to work either as a manager executive or specialized knowledge worker. And then it has to be an international company.
Okay,
Like,
so all those three.
oh, yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
There's the lady back there.
Just an extension to the old question. By nature, the O visa isn't a dual intent visa.
Okay, so technically it is not a dual intent, technically, but there's a green card for individuals of extraordinary ability. So you can move to that. You can apply for permanent residence on the O. You're not supposed to, but I mean, it's not enforced. It's, yeah.
And on that note, do you have to establish your eligibility for EB1 separately, or considering the fact that O1 itself is for extraordinary ability, that in a way satisfies some of the requirements for EB1 as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the requirements are the same. However, you do have to file a separate petition for EB1 classification, as an EB1 is employment-based preference category 1 for the green card. And under that, there's individuals of extraordinary ability, managers or executives, international, and outstanding researchers and scientists. If you have an O1, the government does, that is persuasive evidence that you would qualify for an EB1. It is not a slam dunk. I have clients who've gotten the O1. They are getting denied for the EB1, and that is because in addition to satisfying 3 of the 8 criteria, you also have to show that your presence in the United States would substantially benefit the US. And that's kind of squishy, right? Like, I mean, you're just saying, like, their presence would, it's a substantial benefit to the US because this is a really important field and the person's an innovator. But, you know, the government may or may not buy it. The denial rates have been increasing for EB1s. Yeah.
So for the L1, if you have if you're coming here and you might be opening more locations but you're not sure, can you still apply for it, or what happens in that case? Like if you're not sure if you're gonna actually open more branches.
Yeah, you're not going to get the L. I mean, you need to have an entity set up that is legally related.
So you have to set up the actual entity here already.
Correct.
Using like, okay.
Yeah, so most people come in on the visitor visa for 6 months and set it all up. I mean, they do their due diligence, they do their market analysis, but you don't get a visa where your spouse could come work or your kids could go to school if you maybe want to set something up.
What do you have to? So I'm on B1 or 2 right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I might be doing that. So what do I have to set up?
You have to incorporate.
It's already incorporated in Canada. I'm an executive there for over 2 years now.
Oh, okay.
So how does that?
No, you have to set up in the United States.
So I have to set up another.
Correct.
Okay.
You have to incorporate here. You want to work with corporate counsel. You want to set it up, whether it's an S Corp or PC or whatever. And then you set it up here. And then you want to open up a bank account. You want to rent an office space.
Okay.
Now, with WeWork and these co-working spaces,
Yeah, does that?
well, and so now the government's asking to see the lease, and they are calling WeWorks. And they're making sure it's not just that you have like the We membership, which is $45, but they want to make sure that you have a dedicated space.
So that's like the minimum, like a dedicated space.
Yeah, because a lot of people were just saying, oh, I have an office in Regis, when it wasn't really an office. It was just $65 a month to get the mail there. So yeah,
Okay.
it has to be a real business to qualify for the L.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Hello.
Hi.
Can you apply for multiple visas at the same time?
No. I mean, how would you do that?
I'm asking you.
Well, okay, I'm asking you, okay, so what is the visas you would be applying for at the same time?
Let's say you're an OPT and you want to apply for an H-1B and an O-1 at the same time.
So you're going to go for the lottery.
So I'm an international student and I'm going to work for OPT on the STEM extension. I was just wondering, if you only have a 30% chance of acceptance, could you also apply for O-1 while you're also doing the H-1B application?
So as a practical matter, there's not, most employers would rather wait and see. So there's never really multiple things going on. I mean, as a practical matter, because there's a cost involved, okay? So what they're going to do is they're going to file your H-1B. They're going to wait. I mean, it's just 10 days. Remember, it's March 1 to March 20. By March 31st, you're going to find out. You'll find out. If you're not selected, then they'll move forward with the O. But in practice, that's why I said no. I mean, it just doesn't, there's a cost that no one's really willing to absorb because it doesn't make sense. Now, I will tell you that some people will have two employers filing H's for them. And if the government sees that, they do issue a request for evidence and they ask, what is going on? What is the visa who are you going to work for? So it will create confusion and it will delay adjudication. You're not going to have two approval notices in your hand.
Okay, so if you work part-time for 2 companies, it's not like you have 2 tickets in the lottery.
Okay, so if you are applying in the lottery, you can have 2 employers sponsor you. What I'm saying is then they will come back and say, which one do you work for? What that means is they're not going to give you 2 approval notices. Right? But now if you're going to work for 2 places part-time, you would respond to that request and say, I'm applying to work for both part-time. However, they would already know that from the initial filing. So they would push back to ask.
Okay. And then my last question, let's say you're in the OPT STEM extension. And so you can start your own business, but you cannot work for the business in the 2 following years, right?
Yeah, I know it doesn't make sense.
Is there a workaround somehow? Like, for example, if you have an American co-founder that you really trust, and then you put the majority in his name in some way. Like, how strict is it that you cannot work for your own startup?
Yeah, I mean, it's your school would have to endorse it. And I don't know if your school knows that you started this company, they're probably not going to endorse it. Maybe your school will. It's up to you. I mean, the thing is, you also want to be careful. It could follow you down the road. And so, it could be when you're applying for your green card or your H-1B, it could come up that you actually misrepresented. And if that's the case, they're going to deny you for having misrepresented for an immigration benefit. So that's what I'm saying. Like the amount of money that's going into this kind of investigation, Googling you, checking on LinkedIn, so it's important to know that they're doing that.
Sorry, what was your question? Last question. How I can, let's say you're doing the 3 years STEM extension on OPT, but you can only start a business in the first year, and you can still keep working in the next 2 years for your own business. You can. That's what, yeah. Well, I'm sure you can with the workaround. I'll figure it out. You have a question?
Yeah, I would encourage you, to be very careful with that.
I know.
You have a treaty with New Zealand,
Yeah.
and then if the person in New Zealand wants to come in for service industry, say for a hair salon, they wanted to invest in a hair salon here,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I being the co-owner, would that work?
They have to be 50% owner, or 51 is generally the preferred. So they have to be the majority owner.
They have to be the majority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then how long does it usually take to file? What's
File?
the length, like if they were to set in their papers, would that be at a?
So they would have to register the salon with the consulate in New Zealand,
Okay.
and they would have to show that they've transferred money there, right? So they have to invest in it. So then, and then they would show that they have an ownership interest of 51% at least. Well, they say 50%, but then they're always scrutinizing that more closely. So I always just tell my clients go with 51%. And then that takes about 6 weeks. Then they interview the person. They take 6 weeks to adjudicate the investment.
And so all of this is done through the consulate,
Mm-hmm.
and then come here to the U.S.
Mhm.
and the transfers to the money in the bank.
No, that all needs to be done before.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, no, when you're applying at the consulate, they want to see that the investment's been made, that it's an operating enterprise, all of that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to know that how much time does it take for O1 application to proceed and complete till the end? So my question is basically that right now I am on my STEM extension, and my current company would be applying for H1B, and currently I'm working on a startup, and just if it happens to get the investment in a few months, so obviously I would want to proceed with O1 rather than H1B. So I would want to know how fast can I get that application done so that I can actually live here on O1, not on relying on H1B.
So most lawyers would probably take the fastest to turn around an O, just in terms of document gathering, evidence, writing the testimonial letters from experts in your field. It takes about a month. And then you can ask for premium processing, where you get a decision in 15 days, calendar 15 days. Or you could do regular processing, which is not that much longer. It's like a couple of months. So it's about a few months.
So once if the O1 is selected, can I just, how many years can I live on it, or do I need to apply for green card? How does that work?
Yeah, those are really good questions. What's your country of nationality?
India.
Oh, yeah. So with India, the EB1 category, it's backlogged. So, you could file for the green card, but you're going to have a waiting. There's about a 4-year waiting period right now. Okay. However, the O, you can actually live here indefinitely. So it's granted for 3 years, and then you renew in 1-year increments till you need to, till you want to.
All right, great. Thanks a lot.
Okay? Yeah.
So for concurrent H1B, can a co-founder work for less than 20 hours?
For a what?
A co-founder, can he work for less than 20 hours for his own startup?
No. On the H-1B?
Concurrent H1B.
No. You can't have an ownership interest in the entity. It's not about how many hours you work. It's the ownership interest, because there's no employer-employee relationship if you own it.
Let's say he's not granted any equity, and there's a board member who can fire him. Can he continue?
You could try. There's no guarantee that that would work, because you'd still have to answer that he has an ownership interest. And then you would explain that he has no equity and he could be fired. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for nice information earlier. My question is about when you apply for O visa from F1 status. So, for example, I had before I was a tourist. I made a change of status F1. So, is there any difference, like any exceptions, or like the same, everything the same as if you have F1 visa and passport?
You want to change your status from F1 to O1?
I did already. And if in the future, I'm
Yeah.
looking for O1.
Right. I'm saying you want to change from F1 to O1.
Right.
Yeah, so you would file in your...
Everything the same, like no difference. I mean, I don't have F1 visa in my passport. I have F1 status.
Yes,
right?
yeah. It's a, you.
Everything the same.
Okay, so I'm a lawyer, so when you say everything the same, I don't know what that means. But I mean, what you would do is you would file a petition for O1 classification in which you would ask that your status be changed from F1 to O1. Okay. And when it's approved, you would get an approval notice with a new I-94 at the bottom showing you are now in O1 status. And you do not need to pick up an O1 visa abroad. Is that exactly the same? Okay.
I want to add to that question. So, as a F1 student, you're not supposed to show intent of staying.
It's immigrant intent.
So,
You're not allowed to show immigrant intent.
okay, oh, I see.
So you could go for an O1. That's not showing immigrant intent.
Oh, okay, I see. And none of those visas that you talked about here would violate that rule?
Correct.
Okay, all right.
No, because they're temporary visas. What would violate the rule is if you said, I'd like to apply for a student visa. My dad, who's a U.S. citizen, lives in California. I'm going to go live with him. They're going to say, you're not really going to study. You're going to immigrate to the U.S.
Okay.
Or my wife lives there. That's showing immigrant intent.
I'm sorry, one more question. What about traveling with O1 status?
Yeah, you can. You need to pick up the visa.
Oh, you pick up the visa.
Yeah, so you would need to. I have clients who've picked up their visa. I don't know what nationality you are. Do you need a visa to go to Mexico?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. But I have clients who pick up their O1s in Mexico or Canada. I don't know if you can go to Canada or Mexico without a visa. But yeah, you would need to pick up an O1 visa if you plan on traveling internationally after you change your status to O1. Yeah.
What's the total amount of time you can stay with B1 and B2 combined? Like if you use both?
Well, so it's not so much about using both, but you can stay. Were you given 6 months?
No, I was given like 1 month because I said I was just doing a visit plan, which I am. Yeah.
They only gave you 1 month. Okay, because you can file to extend by another 5 months, and then you could file again. It's usually a maximum of a year, but you really have to show like proof of funds that you have a way to, yeah.
So like I'm just here, like can I change it to like business reasons? Like I'm just seeing if there's opportunity
Yeah,
here. Like,
yeah. I have actually done quite a few clients from this idea to IPO. This is exactly what they do. They get 6 months and they need another 6 months to do their due diligence and yeah.
See what the interest and stuff. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so that's like a pretty reliable way of getting your, I guess, staying here if you have like the documents and stuff from your company. Is that right?
Yeah, you can extend by you can extend by 6 months. You can ask for an extra 6 months, but you have to really document how you're going to finance your stay and what you're going to do. Yeah, you absolutely could do that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
While being on a J1 visa, can I apply for H1B visa?
Okay, so you technically, what kind of J1 do you have?
Intern visa.
Yeah, you should definitely not let your sponsoring organization know that you're trying to do that. They will terminate your J1 status, or they should, because you're not supposed to be doing that. Like I said, does it happen? Yes.
So from the immigration point of view, that's not something I shouldn't do. I just shouldn't mention that to my sponsoring company.
Well, you shouldn't be doing it, but employers they do sponsor someone for an H. and it used to be something you're not supposed to do, but everyone sort of let it happen. Now I'm hearing clients where they talked about it with their employer told the sponsoring organization somehow, and the sponsor terminated their J1 status. So I'm hearing that now. So I think if the employer sponsors you for the lottery, you guys can see if you're selected. I don't think you want to be mentioning it to the sponsor organization. But again, you're technically not supposed to be going for the H. I'm being videotaped, so I'm being very careful about what. I don't want DHS to say me saying, don't tell your sponsor organization.
Another question is also being on J1 visa. Is there any way for me to sign a document that would confirm that I'm a co-founder of a startup and I have some equity in it, since I can't accept any payment outside of my sponsorship company, and also any deferred payment, which is actually an equity? So is there any other way for me to become a co-founder while being on J1 visa?
How would you be a co-founder? Wait, so where are you working right now?
I'm working at a startup which sponsored my J1 visa, and at the same time I would like to join another person to start a startup, basically to found a startup and become a co-founder of it. But I read online that while I'm on J1 visa, I can't sign any document, for example, stating that I get any equity, because that means deferred payment, and I can't get any payment outside of my original company. So is there any way for me, for example, just to make sure that once I start working outside of my normal working hours on any other projects, that I actually have any stake in it, that once my J1 visa status ends, I have some sort of document that confirms I am like part of the...
Yeah, I know, but that document is false. Are you truly deferring your equity in all this?
I mean, the equity is like...
I mean, just signing a document saying something isn't enough if in substance it's not true.
Yeah, that's what I mean. If, for example, we set up an LLC and I become a member of it, which wouldn't mean necessarily that I have equity, but just like a document that can confirm that I have the rights also to this company and so on.
Yeah, I would just put, I mean, my advice to you in today's climate, I mean, I'm just not going to advise you to do stuff. I mean, this is not the climate in which to get cute and look for workarounds. And if I sign something, I mean, that's
what I thought. I just wanted to make
sure. Yeah, I know, and I understand, because I think 5 years ago, people could push, there's a saying, you could push the envelope. But the way these officers are digging around on, it's kind of crazy, and the stuff that's coming up the thing is, if you apply for permanent residence down the road, I mean, they could dig this stuff up and say, you lied. This is the way this is the climate has become.
Okay. Thank you very much.
I think, Rob, how much time do I have? I have 3 minutes, guys. Anybody have a 3-minute question? You guys had great questions, by the way. Really good questions. I mean, there's already been so much change. Do you mean? Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he's fighting. Everything's in court. I mean, it depends on. There's a fee increase. He's proposed very significant fees. Increases. One of which affects green cards. So the fee to get a green card right now is about $1,225, and that's going to increase to about $2,000. Naturalization application fees are going to increase. So fees are being increased. He's fighting. That question is a big one. Yeah.
So you mentioned you can actually ask for multiple employers to file H1 for you.
You can.
In that situation, what if you said we might be challenged for who exactly we are working for? Can I say actually I just got an offer starting from October 1st, and this is just an offer, right? I can still claim that.
You need to choose one. They're not going to approve multiple.
Yeah, after getting selected, I will choose one.
Yeah, That when they push back and they ask you, you have to say which one you're going with. Or you can explain that one is for part-time, one is for full-time. Practically speaking, you have to be pretty lucky to have. Now the system has gotten easier, so it is more possible that you could have multiple employers sponsoring you. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you offer like one-on-one, just like consulting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do have consultation. There's a fee, but yeah, we can video chat, we can phone call, we can meet in person. My office is in Oakland. It's right off the BART if you use BART.
So I guess I just use your LinkedIn or web, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Did you have one?
Yeah, I have a South Korean nationality. Is there a backlog for immigration?
No. For which? For not for EB2 or EB3. Which category?
EB2.
Yeah, there's no backlog for South Koreans for EB2 or EB3. There is a backlog for EB1 right now. For everybody.
What's the backlog?
There's a wait. So the way it works is there's a limit on how many green cards each category can have, and any one nationality can only have 7%. So that's why there's a huge backlog for Indians, huge backlog for Chinese, because there are more than 7% of Chinese are applying. Does that make sense? So there's 145,000 employment-based green cards available each year. The number of Chinese nationals or Indian nationals who want those green cards is more than 7% of that 145,000. Is that making sense? So, but if you are from South Korea, there's not a backlog. Or New Zealand.
So when is the green card lottery filed in New Zealand or?
Oh, the green card lottery is something separate.
Okay.
He's asking for employment-based category. The green card lottery.
I was asking for a green card afterwards.
Lottery.
Yeah, because once I get into EB2,
He's at.
and then I want to start my application for green card. Right?
Yeah, there's no backlog. That is separate from the annual lottery, where I'm not sure if South Korea is a country that can apply for the green card lottery. That's separate. That's like 50,000 green cards. It's an annual lottery, right? Is that what you're asking about? He's asking about employment-based green card, right? EB2, EB3?
Right.
Yeah.
All right, let's give it up for the audience. Change your seats. It's time for the raffle. And chances look pretty good because we have one business card. So does anyone who want into the raffle already done so? Has everyone already done so? I guess it's just Claire. So we'll skip the preliminary prizes. I was going to give out Dale and Arrival by Roger Royce, How to Avoid Legal Mistakes That Could Kill Your Startup. It's speaking to next week. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. Now wait. So we have a grand prize from City National Bank. So,
Okay.
Here's another card.
What? Claire, Director of Operations of Sentry.
Claire.
Oh, Claire, you get a prize.
You won last week too.
Oh. I didn't know it last week. I was
Oh,
looking for it.
want a picture with Kamal?
Thank you.
Thank you. Want a picture with Kamal?
Oh.
Get on that side.
What? Get her in the middle? That's so nice.